Hello, bibliophiles and those raising bibliophiles. Without ratings and warning labels, trying to find which books are appropriate for your children to read is like navigating wild terrain without a map and a compass. I don't know about you, but I have been burned more than once handing my child a book that I thought was clean and appropriate for them to read. I'm a fellow mom, educator, reading specialist, and literary enthusiast trying to find great books for my children and yours to read. If you're looking for real reviews from a mom with a biblical worldview, then welcome and enjoy this week's book review. So this week's book review is Book 2, Firebred by Julie Kagawa, and this is part of the Storm Dragons series. So before I get any further into my review of the second book, this book does open with a prologue, and so that was different from the first book. I'm just going to read a little bit of it to you just to kind of give you an idea, again, of the writing style of the author. So if this is the first video that you're seeing, it kind of just gives you a taste of that. The great dragon stood before his peers, feeling their eyes upon both him and the hulking shadow before them all. Shock and horror. Two feelings that he hadn't felt in centuries rippled over him. This plan, Malakath's plan, was not only insane, it was horrific. "You cannot do this, Malakath," Aronal said, finding his voice. Rumbling growls rose around him from the handful of dragons watching the pair. The loudest grumble came after Ravenar, Malakath's second, who glared at him with angry golden eyes. Did they really think Aronal would have agreed to this atrocity? Had Malakath truly convinced them that this was the only way? "And what would you have us do otherwise, Aronal?" Malakath's deep voice, in contrast to everyone's, was calm. In the shadows and gloom of the underground chamber, all Aronal could see of him were his eyes, like red coals in the darkness. "Should we wither away and die, our kind fading into memory until we are forgotten? Should our entire race be obliterated?" "Of course not, but this isn't right, Malakath. There has to be another way, a compromise." "Compromise?" Malakath's voice rose, his anger washing over Aronal like a cold flood. "Where was that compromise at the Shattering, where the short-lived races betrayed us?" he growled. "Where was that compromise when they sentenced our kind to a slow extinction? Ignorance does not excuse them, or what they did." Malakath took a step forward, huge talons raking a deep gouge in the stone floor. "This is the only way to save our race. You are a fool if you cannot see that." "No," Aronal shook his head, facing the great shadow looming before him. "I can't allow you to do this, Malakath. We were like brothers once, but you've become lost in your hate, and what you're proposing is an atrocity. Please, for the sake of our friendship, reconsider what you are doing. This isn't enough." Malakath lashed out so quickly Aronal never saw it coming, but the pain was unlike anything he had felt before. One moment he was whole, the next fire seemed to explode from his shoulder as Malakath's talons ripped into his wing. He staggered back, clenching his jaw as the ring of dragons around him stiffened in shock and alarm. Pain rippled up and down his side, but he refused to make a sound. Instead, he straightened, glaring at Malakath with narrowed eyes. He could suddenly feel his wing hanging limply from his body, the tips dragging along the floor, and he knew with a cold, terrible certainty that he would never fly again. The shadow that was Malakath's side, smoke curling into the air from his nostrils. For a moment, Aronal sensed regret in that smoldering gaze before Malakath shook his head and turned away. "If you are not with me, then you are against me," he said, already disarming him. "A pity. I would have liked to have you at my side when I brought our kind to greatness again. But it seems you would rather side with the betrayers. Get out of my sight," he said to his second. "Get him out of my sight," he said to his second. "I wish to never lay eyes on this traitor again." And so that is the prologue. And then the story picks up essentially where book 1 left off. Kagawa does a great job of just giving a little bit of context and reminding the readers, if it's been some time, what happened in the previous book and where we are in the situation. Jem and Remy are trying to convince Captain Cutlass to continue their journey to this unknown island where technically the true dragons are supposed to live, and with the information they need, these true dragons should have in order for them to live with all the things that are possibly happening. So she somewhat
Captain Cutlass reluctantly agrees, and the crew is off to find this floating island. Meanwhile, Bart is really tortured internally by his thoughts and actions of the past, and the idea that he's really going to have to come face to face with what happened when he left the island. So readers are really soon brought into the secret that Bart has been harboring all these years, what really led him to leave the island with the true dragon in the first place, and really what's transpired for him while he was there. Most of Bart's internal struggle is really for nothing, as the entourage does come face to face with Arenal, the true dragon. Bart is quickly sort of released from his guilt as Arenal is pleased to see him and lets Bart know that there's really no grudge or anger being held on his part after he left. Unfortunately, Arenal is not able to truly help with the quest to save the world. So their entire search for him isn't necessarily for nothing, because they do get something out of it, but he's not able to help the way that they thought. He does pass, as in like dying, but when he does, he gives the knowledge that will help them for the next leg of the journey onto Storm. And so when he passes, he sort of disappears. Storm now internally just has this knowing and the coordinates to reach the island of the elves, which is their next leg of the journey. So as they leave the island, Jaros is present. He's coming after them really fast. After some quick maneuvering and thinking, the captain and the crew are able to escape and continue on their path to finding the island of the elves. Once they reach the island, the main characters travel aboard or abroad, and they end up coming face to face with the elder of the elves, and they then really get their next step, which is to go to the Forbidden Zone to seek the archives that should have the information that they're seeking. And once they arrive at the Forbidden Zone, Ravenar, who is also a true dragon, which comes from sort of the prologue to the story, he is really trying to destroy them and keep them from entering. They do have an intense battle. The children, Bart and Captain Cutlass, do end up entering the archive, and they're met by this like ghostly keeper of the records. The whereabouts of the machine that they're seeking is revealed, and their quest leading into the third and final book of the series is really set in place. So overall, the story is clean. There's good themes of cooperation, compassion, responsibility. Magic is definitely very much a part of the story. Again, we're dealing with this fantasy story. They use it to help evade their enemies and also to defeat them. You do have this ghostly specter towards the end of the book, so parents should definitely be aware of that. Be aware of the other fantastical features that are in this story, because that may or may not be something that you want your children to read. With all of that being said, there really aren't any like cantations. There's no use of spells on anyone. The magic ability is really related to crystals and elemental powers like lightning and fire and wind. If you go to my website at holdingsteadfastreaders.com, you're going to get some more details that you're not going to get from this particular video. So I mentioned some quotes, anything else about superstition, some of the magical elements, particularly when they get to the island of the elves, the elder. They do have some beliefs around that and this like sacred grove of the ancestors. And so I definitely want to make you aware of some of those things. So if you go to holdingsteadfastreaders.com, you're going to get more of those details. The story overall is very fast paced. Readers are going to quickly be swept into the action and the storyline that really keeps the characters moving, and they're going from one challenge to another. Book 3 is set to be released in 2026, and so I'm definitely going to add that to my read list. That way that will finish out the series and really make all of that information available to you as parents. So thank you for joining me for this week's book review. I hope that was helpful to you and that you will join me next week for another book review.